Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video on Mr. Arthur Birling. So who is Arthur Birling? He's a respectable middle-class man. Mr. Birling is a wealthy factory owner, enjoying the respectable middle-class life in the industrial city of Brumley. He's an active member of the community in Brumley and thinks that he might be in the running for a knighthood. He is proud of his life, referring to himself several times as a hard-headed, practical man of business. It is soon made clear that Arthur Birling was not always the level of social standard that he is now. When he's first introduced in Act 1, he's described as a heavy-looking, rather portentous man in his middle 50s, with fairly easy manners, but rather provincial in his speech. Here, pretentious means that he is serious and self-important. In terms of the rather provincial in his speech, well, that's referring to his upbringing being not as grand as he is now. At one point in the dinner, he says, "A good dinner too, Sybil. Tell cook from me." So this is reinforced throughout the play that Mr. Birling has bad taste. And this is because his casual mention of the cook breaks the expected formality and shows a general lack of respect of social conventions and a sense of entitlement. It could also be seen as an example of how the wealthy are disconnected from those who serve them, the working classes. One of the key themes in An Inspector Calls is responsibility. And at one point in the play, he says, "I can't accept any responsibility. If we were all responsible for everything that happened to everybody we'd have anything to do with, it would be very awkward, wouldn't it?" Mr. Birling is shaken by the investigation and is shocked by the behaviour of his son Eric. However, he doesn't learn any lessons during the course of the play. When it seems that the inspector might have been an imposter, he is overjoyed and mocks the others for having been tricked by the investigation. So how can we link him to the context? When the play was written after World War II in 1945, there was no form of welfare from the government to help the poor. J.B. Priestley believed in socialism, the political idea based on common ownership and that we should all look after one another. Mr. Birling represents greedy businessmen who only care for themselves. Priestley uses him to show the audience that even Smiths of the world will continue to suffer if people like Birling remain in positions of power. So what are some words that we could use to describe Mr. Birling? He's an authoritarian, overconfident, ambitious, self-assured, capitalistic, egotistical, conservative, complacent, materialistic. You could say he's narrow-minded, pompous, stubborn, insensitive to those around him, class-conscious, a patriarch, which means a male leader, opinionated, arrogant, and short-sighted. And finally, we're going to end off on some key quotes that you could use when writing about Mr. Birling in an essay question. He says, "A man has to mind his own business and look after himself and his own," which shows his sort of capitalistic views. He also says, "My duty to keep labour costs down." He brags how, "I was an alderman for years and Lord Mayor 2 years ago, and I'm still on the bench," which shows him as a powerful figure. He also says, "The Germans don't want war. Nobody wants war, except some half-civilized folks in the Balkans." Now don't forget, this play was released in 1945 after the events of the Second World War, but it's set before it. So here we can see the irony in Mr. Birling's war as talks about the war, as audiences at the time knew that the Germans did go to war. And similar to this, he talks about the Titanic. She sails next week, and unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable. And again, his words are shrouded in irony. And finally, he also says, "You think everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we were all mixed up together like bees in a hive, community, and all that nonsense."